before you start judging. That may be the only pic of me floating around in space for you all to see. I'm a mama's boy and preacher's son. I was also an ex-con. Now, don't judge me for that. Judge me for the little kid who loved to play. For the mother I love. For the teenager who loved to hang out with friends and tease the girls. For a young man who had dreams.
It was told in a very creative way, which was almost entirely through pictures. And despite it being almost more of a slideshow, if you will, than a moving picture film, it was still so extremely captivating. And the narration, I have to give a shout out to, was done so beautifully. You could just hear and feel the emotion in the voice actors' narration and storytelling. And I think that's really the star of the film. I think that's what really brought it all together, was this just very endearing, captivating story. And something else that I really liked was how the overall message tied past events with also current ones. So I think that, a lot of times we like to equate violence of Black people, and more specifically Black men, to things of the past. Like, we're thinking Civil War era, it's Jim Crow laws and all of that stuff. But, having it juxtaposed, if you will, to current events, it's the same thing, just taking on a different form, right? And so I think it's important to acknowledge the violent history of the past, but also recognizing that the same thing is still happening here. And just because it looks different doesn't mean that it's not just as debilitating and just as traumatic and just as harmful to the Black community. I thought this was a really powerful film. I thought it was done very respectfully, very beautifully. It was haunting. It was chilling. It was real.
I believe it was a really strong choice to use the visuals that they did of all that items and photos from the time when telling that story. Certainly something that goes back over 100 years would be hard to find footage of. So I like the technique and the style that they used. I thought it kept things visually interesting without going overboard, and it was all just very cohesive that way. The story itself is a very sad and touching story, and it's voiced here beautifully by the voice actor, and it's just really well done, and the message cannot be heard enough. Certainly it's as important today as it was back in 1933, and for that reason alone I'm glad this one exists. But for a host of other ones, go check it out. It's worth it.
I love the imagery that we get and the voiceover description. It was very hard seeing a lot of those images, but I think that it worked well with the voiceover, and it really brought it to life visually, which helped me understand a lot of it. It's very sad when we find out who this person is and why he was unjustly murdered. And it was really it was a very hard film to watch because of how real it was. It was disgusting to hear what they did to his body after they murdered him, and what they did to his mother and what they forced her to see. It was just really disgusting, really hard to watch. It was also a very powerful moment is when they show all of the Black innocent people that have been murdered in more recent times. I think that it just shows how little has changed over such a long period of time, and how Black people are still seen as disposable. And it was really hard, and it was tough, but it was very powerful, and it brought a lot of realness to something that not everyone understands. So I really think it was a very important film, and I think it should be seen by many people. And I think that the way the director did it was very powerful and very touching. So yeah, I really like this film.
Really difficult and important content. The storytelling device made for a really powerful exploration of history, and it's a history that doesn't sound too far off from what we're experiencing nowadays. So I thought that tie at the end to modern racism was chilling and really important to bring the piece full circle. And the photos, there's something that was just so emotionally drawing to me, seeing those, especially thinking of someone back as a young child and thinking of the dignity and the innocence that is destroyed.
Such a haunting story, and loved the choice for the narration. The voice had so much richness and depth to it, and the emotion that came through and the vulnerability was just beautifully presented. Thought it was well edited. The images that were selected just worked so well with the overall piece. Thought it was a very powerful message, and they made it so relevant to current times, and just think the filmmaker did a really nice job with this piece.
I thought it was a brilliant plot device to have Mr. Gregory's voice posthumously narrated by Michael L. May, who did so with great conviction and believability. I honestly felt like I was hearing the voice of a man who had been murdered and had his heart ripped out from him. I mean, it's a terrible story, but it resonates. It resonates at its strongest when these photographs, some of Martin Luther King, some of there are plenty of very thoughtful and provocative photographs that are very nicely and tightly edited together without a musical score, which makes it that much more powerful. I thought that was where the film was really at its strongest and most tragic, which is ultimately what the story of Mr. Gregory is.
So beautifully narrated, so well and beautifully introduced. It really placed me in the era, in the 1930s, because of the vintage photos and the shotgun stamps and just how everything was narrated and everything just had the vibe, you know? Subject matter was heavy and graphic, but I think it absolutely was important to be, and not to whitewash our history as we do. All of these horrific events happened as well, and just to turn an eye and say, no, it's not part of history, no, we didn't do that, or this didn't take place, or to cover it up is not doing justice to the past.
Chilling in the photographs that are used to tell the story, as the narrator so eloquently does put it. It really brings to life his words and the severity of the racist history of the United States and all around the globe, frankly. We see firsthand how profoundly dangerous racism is to the assurance of a prosperous society for all. And we see how it has had this lasting effect, because the story that we see here has very much been repeated in various different ways up into recent history, and continues to do so and will continue to do so until we do something about it. And I think that's the message that this piece gets across so strongly, that if we do not try to instigate some kind of substantive change, then films like this will just need to be made longer, because nothing will have been changed. It's a very good piece, very powerful, and uses both visuals and audio to really get its point across in a way that's lasting and memorable.